Thank you very much. So I'm Pierre Pronchery, or otherwise known as Corbin, in the community. So I will drive you through the project, the EdgeBSD project, try to introduce where we come from, where we came into being, what we are aiming for, a lot like what was already presented this morning, maybe a bit less optimistic way, because as you will see, there are some specific reasons which made me actually start this project. So I will start with a personal word. I introduce myself. This project is very dear to me, of course. I started it myself in summer of 2013. It eventually grew as a team. We now have 10 members. So basically, I think I need to explain a bit about what I did before the project so that you can understand a bit better where it comes from. So I'm Pierre. I'm an OS development hobbyist. I've been tinkering with operating systems since 2001. Tried Linux, vBSD at the time in different ways. I've been freelancing as a security consultant for quite a while now, since 2007 actually. I'm an EdgeBSD developer officially since May 2012. And I founded EdgeBSD in July 2 years ago. So it's still a relatively young project, actually. We only have 2 years behind us now. A lot happened before EdgeBSD. Of course, we are building on what was already done. But something led to the creation of this project, and I will get to that. So before founding EdgeBSD, I already sort of forked Debian in 2001. Because already when I started open source, using open source systems, I was not fully happy with the experience. And what I did first was to create a graphical installer for the coming Woody release of Debian, which is what I was using the most at the time. Basically, I was sick and tired of fixing Windows for my friends and for my family, so I just went for something that they could install themselves, and I tried to achieve that. So this is how it looked after first install. I guess you haven't seen this in 10 years. Yeah, this is how it looked at the time. So that was a before founding EdgeBSD. But from there, back in 2001, I was just a single individual. I wanted to influence the Debian project, but I didn't believe that I could do it myself on my own. And it was, of course, too much work for one student, one private individual like me, to keep up with the pace of the updates of Debian. So I decided to get my own agenda. And I started from Linux from scratch, LFS. And I changed the name of the project into D4R Linux. And I had 2 releases based on this, for which I wrote a package manager at the time. I think it was C++. I think it's my last personal C++ project. I ended it in 2004. I've been sticking to C after that. Anyway, so turns out I was wrong in a sense that it's always possible to influence the politics of open source projects, but of course it takes time, and I was completely new, and I didn't know that it was so easy to get inside the community and actually speak. So while this was a very personal project, it also gave me the freedom to experiment, much more than inside a much bigger one. So from working on Linux from scratch, what I believed would be super easy, always /configure, make install, you have your package, done. Turns out it was really not this way, and I spent more time usually trying to understand how specific software worked than actually I thought it would take me to do it myself. I was wrong again, of course, but I've decided to write my own system from scratch at that point. And of course, I'm nowhere near completion, but I learned a lot doing this. I'm trying to gather everything that I learned about all of the different components that I look at in this project. And that's what I've been doing for now about 10 years, working on this. And this is how it looks when booting into QEMU. So I'm reusing the NetBSD kernel so far, because I need a base. I didn't want to start with the kernel right away. But all of the userland is mine, except for the dynamic loader. I didn't rewrite that yet. So that's basically where I am. But obviously, to be able to conduct that work, I needed a base. And as you can see, I'm keen on NetBSD, and I've been using NetBSD for a while now to base this work on. actually, the project is not only about the low-level libc. I have 3 big orientations. One is to be self-hosted, which is represented by this part. One is to have a complete usable desktop environment, which was already dear to my heart before. And this is how it looks now. This is running in a simulator that I wrote to simulate the screen density of like some tablet devices that I have. And this way I can test the interface with different resolution settings or whatnot. And I wrote the panel, the desktop manager, file manager, preferences, the mixer, which is using NetBSD's native API, the virtual keyboard. So this is all open source and in package source even. I presented this 2 years ago, I think, in Package Source Con. You can find either videos or slides about it, and I'm happy to demonstrate after this talk anyway. So anyway, maybe I should also mention the third component of D4ROS as a project, which is a distributed framework. I'm trying to connect all of my devices together. I don't want anymore to have to synchronize contacts or which news messages I read between all of my devices. I want to have one system and to have different accesses to it through my devices. So that's the actual main goal of this project. But anyway, this is like far future still, and this is not the focus of the presentation today. But all of this has been a learning process. And I've learned doing this that it's a very bad idea to think that you can do everything better yourself on your own, and it's just too much work. But I did it anyway with EdgeBSD. So this happened because in June 2013, Giulio Merino, JMMV from NetBSD and also FreeBSD, gave himself a self-interview after leaving board, B-O-A-R-D. And actually, he got bored, B-O-R-E-D, being on board. He felt a lack of leadership, an inability to take risk from the NetBSD project itself, no desire to recruit new users. And he released a huge blog post explaining all of the different aspects of his, like the issues that he found. This bittersweet feeling, he said. And eventually he grew demotivated and didn't spend as much time as he wanted on the project anymore. And of course, seeing this, which was not actually the first time that this sort of thing happened with NetBSD or with many open source projects anyway, there was a lot of discussion, but no action. And I just couldn't take it. I wanted to see new NetBSD users. I wanted a clear leadership. I wanted to know where the project was heading. And there was actually nothing. I completely agreed with his vision. And so I decided to react. So EdgeBSD is a reaction to that. The first thing that I felt was missing with NetBSD was tools. Tools are really important. They are critical to get anywhere, and a project requires tools, like always. And we need to give developers good tools. Git is such a tool. It's maybe not the best, but I don't care. It's what a lot of people use. It's what I ended up using after BAP pushed me into it 3 years ago. And it was super easy to start EdgeBSD. Was just one command, was git clone with this address where there was already a mirror, a git mirror tree converted from CVS to JIT by Jörg, a NetBSD developer. And I just started from there. And what's really cool about JIT is that nowadays, a lot of people use it, and you have a lot of tools for it, and you can just find your own way of working with it. There are lots and lots of different possible workflows. And this is a view of actually package source with JIT from the EdgeBSD repository. So of course, JIT is not perfect. It has issues. There are showstoppers on some hardware, but with regular laptops from 2015, it's absolutely fine. Nowadays, we can cross-compile. We don't necessarily need the history when we work on older platforms, so we can just copy the files over, just like CVS does, and it's fine. But no one would take that decision, because it's, of course, JIT is not the only system, the only tool doing that, and there was just no one really stepping out and doing it. So I just gave it a try, shaking things a bit, and just testing it, actually. So some developers were already actually using JIT privately. which is absolutely fine. That's actually the model. You just work distributed. You have your own repository, then you push what you want to push, your branches when they're ready to the general audience, to the public. You can work in teams, share repositories, whatnot. This doesn't need any leadership, but then there has to be someone saying, we switch to it. Of course, before switching, someone has to actually go and test it. So this is exactly what we are trying to do. And being the master in my own house, I have a clear leadership on EdgeBSD, and I can say, we use JIT now, we just tried out. So basically, I'm a sort of democratic, benevolent dictator, but I still wanted to give the project a sustainable structure, to have something which is bigger than me, hopefully. And so I decided to go for a single project leader, to have a clear leadership, to then have a single authority for every aspect of the project. This includes sysadmin, this includes marketing, artwork, managing the master branches, really managing the release engineering, doing all of the pull-ups, the security updates, whatnot, deciding which direction to go to technically, what to focus on, and so on. And we have an annual election process, which we actually did once in 2 years, so we should do it again, actually. And one thing that I really appreciate from this is that it brings people forward to bring, to propose a platform and to campaign for it, to bring a vision of the project at least every year and say, okay, this is where we are, this is what we wanted to do, this is what we achieved, this is how I see the future going, and please vote for it. And unfortunately, it's something that's not present in EdgeBSD right now. We don't have something like this, and I think it's missing. So with this said, one goal is to welcome users and developers to the project. We have a structure for it, so it's actually super easy. We have an induction process. I believe I describe it in this talk, in some slide. We are a team, actually, so it became bigger than myself, and I'm really, really happy about this. We are now 10 developers, some of which were already NetBSD developers when starting this project, like Radoslav or Guillaume, GLS, and some others, which I really, really find great, actually joined NetBSD after joining EdgeBSD. So it was a way for them to get to know all of the different pieces and get in touch with everyone and then be part of the bigger community. So yes, we have an induction process, which is really simple. We just send me right now, because I'm the leader, public SSH key with an associated username. It just has to be available, a valid email address for redirection, and you're in. You can push your branches to our Git repository, which is coming from the one from GitHub pushed by Jorg. So it's the same commits, it's the same, you can merge, you can cherry pick, you can do whatever you want, the regular Git workflow, and just push your code and experiment, share it, and so on. In comparison, when I was working on a private branch with NetBSD, each time I was doing a commit, there were about 500 emails sent to everyone. And if I made any kind of mistake, or if I was just playing around with the code and just wanted to save my work, I had to send 500 emails around, and that's not acceptable. It's not something that I felt comfortable with, interrupting the workflow of 500 other people and sending out messages useless to everyone out there. I want my code to be in a central repository once ready. So it may look a bit like a clone of NetBSD, but actually it's more about welcoming new users and developers in a more accessible way, experimenting with new tools, having someone who actually takes decisions, and therefore reacting faster to whatever is going on. New technologies, new ways of doing things, whatnot. So what does this mean in practice? So doing this, of course, I had to reflect on what is the difference between doing this privately on my own and doing it publicly. So EdgeBSD, just like the initials say, is a distribution, and it's a key aspect of our BSD projects. So I would define EdgeBSD as a distribution of NetBSD, basically, much like a vendor. So reflecting about this, I wondered, what is a distribution? And it involves, according to Wikipedia, and it's also my belief, the process of delivering software to the end user. And therefore, it should be usable, stable, and secure. You need to get the software in a secure manner to the user so that it's actually the software that you intend to distribute, that reaches the machines. It has to be usable, otherwise you have no user. And the users need to keep using it, so it has to be stable in some way, for some definition of stable. So EdgeBSD is trying to be stable. And in this context, we consider that stability means you have one major version number, and as long as you stay on this release, it doesn't change, because version numbers have no meaning past the first digit for regular users. Stability also means that when you update, the system keeps working the same way, which is right now not the case on EdgeBSD. If you update package source, you have a whole bunch of new versions of everything that was developed out there, and many things can break. I have to fix my scanner every 3 months because HPLib changes the way of doing things or something went wrong, and I don't want that. Every 2 years is fine, but every 3 months, I just cannot take it. And I mean that because I need a stable base to develop on. Of course, it's nice to have the shiny new releases, but I need to have a system I can rely on. So outside of major releases, what we push is only fixes to functionality fixes, and hardware support when available. So this means a rolling release. Now, this may be a huge debate. I don't want to have it. I just want to try it out, see if it actually works, what is the workflow, if it's possible in the first place, especially with NetBSD as a base, which has a completely different way of handling releases. So what this means in practice is that we have continuous builds of NetBSD 6 and 7 right now. So where the releases 6.02, 6.03, 6.1, and so on are being prepared. We just have binaries at all times available for each new fix, so they can be actually tested right away. And eventually bugs can be found and reported to NetBSD proper. In the same fashion, current can already be called EdgeBSD 8, because we can just apply the same build recipes and have a rolling release of current, just like Debian Unstable, which also is very useful, and I know a lot of Debian developers running Unstable. Doesn't matter so much anymore anyway with virtualization and so on. We can run multiple instances on regular hardware. This also means, very importantly, LTS support for package source branches, meaning that what we do is we choose a particular release which came out around the same time as the original system, and we just use it and maintain it for security. So we don't have shiny new versions of everything, but also we try to keep things from breaking, and we just push functionality fixes again, just like in base, and security, fix security issues as much as we can. It's a tedious task, but we've been trying that for a couple of years now, and now even Joyent is doing it too. They have customers. These customers want the system to be stable. They don't want to have to fix issues every 3 months. So they have now a number of LTS branches that they maintain for their customers. If you want to see, to have more details about how this works as a process and the way we proposed it as a project, you can read the paper that I submitted together with GLS, Guillaume Lasmeillou, at EdgeBSDcon a couple of years ago. We gave a talk over there, and we basically explain how we see inconsistency in the way the releases are managed between EdgeBSD base and package source, and how we see a way of solving the issues associated with that to be less confusing to users, which is, for us, a key point. The system has to be usable. And I think the first thing, being usable, is providing an upgrade path. Because if something is broken, it's not the end of the world, as long as you can update to something that's fixed. And in the real world out there of regular users, binary packages and sets are essential. They have to be first-class citizens. And I'm really glad to see that FreeBSD now is doing this, thanks to Baptiste and PackageNG. It was really great. I have a FreeBSD system somewhere, and I don't have to care about like updating everything from source again and rebuilding all of the dependencies. Adjust, package, update, upgrade, and it's done. I can even have a cron job doing this for me, it doesn't matter. And therefore, EdgeBSD offers 2 tools by default to achieve this. A quick script that I wrote, which is called EdgeBSD update, which updates the base system from Sept, and packaging for the packages, which was written by Emil a few years ago. And this tool proved absolutely invaluable in our case. Since we have the LTS branch, we can also just do packaging update upgrade and getting the new fixes, and it's as simple as that. This is also used by Joyent, incidentally, and it has provided them a lot of, let's say, they have even provided patches for packaging, especially regarding performance lately, really completely changing the way it works, allocating about 100 megs less, which makes it really snappy now. That's great. Thanks, Joyent, for that. But still, that's 2 different tools. And for the user, it should be, I have a system, I update it. So it should be 1 tool. And we are trying we are investigating ways to reach that, to achieve that. In the meantime, this is how EdgeBSD update works. So basically, it's downloading sets automatically if they're not already cached on a local system. It's checking signatures, so we have signed sets. And before the finishing with the process, it's also running post-install, which is here described as configuring the system, then gets rid of what it downloaded, if anything, and then the update is successful. So that's all it takes, just 1 command, downloads everything, checks signatures, unpacks, and done. This is what we have right now. It seems to work fine. And this is definitely in line with what we want to be. We want to be simpler. We want to get simpler. And if we dive a bit more into userland, just like Dexter said, Michael Dexter said, sometimes by removing parts, you actually get something better. And in our case, we consider that if you have an alternative between the base system and the packages, you have 1 alternative too many. So this means we get rid of X in base. We don't care about it anymore. It makes also for smaller sets. We don't want to have any duplication anymore between base and package source. So we will slowly disable everything that has a package from the base system, and therefore not provide postfix anymore or bind or anything like this. We want to have a bare bone bootstrap and then handle everything as much as possible with packaging or whichever tool we have for handling packages. Of course, this shouldn't matter actually for developers, because developers know how to get X back in base if they want it there. It's the users that do not know how to do the switch, and that they even have to choose in the first place. So this should make life much easier for regular users. To illustrate this, there is this thing that fanboys always like to do, compare systems with such analogies, but I like this one, because of course, with such a shaver, well, you can shave, you can also cut your own throat. If you're on Windows, well, okay, you're gonna have the shiny electric thing that you need to pay for, but it will shave. And if you have a Mac, I don't know, well, here you obviously cannot do much, but you may have a different opinion. I just want to stick to BSD on my system, and I want to fight for it. So for this, we need to have a usable system and to keep fighting for it. Getting to the point even of why not one-click installs, like in Ubuntu, you just browse to a website, you like the software, you click, it's already been packaged, you recognize that, you install it, it's signed, so it's fine, and there you go, you can test it. We need to get this kind of thing, otherwise we will just be irrelevant very soon. So another thing we should provide, and we are trying to provide, is pre-cooked images. So you can just download and run in a VM, download the system and run it in a VM. There is a script that I wrote doing this called Edge. Of course, there are plenty of alternatives. It was just simple enough to compile the existing tools and just script them together that I could write this. And so far it works fine. I'm trying to package it, and if there is any better alternative, of course, I will definitely migrate, but so far it's doing okay. as I already mentioned, we want to have base as packages. There are different ways of approaching this. We could build packages directly from base, or move everything to package source, or get it from package source instead. And why not provide bootstrap kits like FreeBSD does now? And it seems to work fine. I didn't hear anyone complain about it, actually. And it's been working fine for me as well. So that should be okay. Of course, doing all of this is a lot of work. It's very ambitious. EdgeBSD is an ambitious project. If you don't set yourself high goals, you cannot achieve much, I think. But with this said, there are also a lot of low-hanging fruits, and we found a lot. We try to push them back into NetBSD upstream, and some of them include default options in package source, because if we go with binary packages, we have to provide useful binary packages, and by default, GTK Plus is built without cups support, so you have to configure LPR to actually print, which is not something I want to have to do. I'm not a big fan of cups, but at least it recognizes my different printers. It has an interface to configure them, and it's fine. I don't see why we couldn't have cups enabled by default. Of course, when I offered to do this, there was contention, but in EdgeBSD we have that. We also enable dbus, IPv6, LDAP, Pulse Audio, SLP discovery, SSL and TLS, whatever we noticed that it was not built by default, like in postfix, which is a real problem for me. I like my emails to stay confidential as much as they can be, and it doesn't involve only GNU-PG. Not everybody uses GNU-PG. And stuff like Pulse Audio, okay, it doesn't work fine for me, I have to say, but if we don't try it, if we don't use it, we will not find the bugs and actually get them fixed. And nowadays, on any kind of modern desktop, you want to have audio mixing, and it's a tool for doing that, and I think it should be enabled by default. And even going farther than that, of course, having written the default OS desktop before, as I mentioned, I offer to choose a default desktop environment, and then it should be mine. Well, of course, there are alternatives. XFC looks really great now, thanks to Guillaume and Yuri, who have been working a lot on this. And it's probably going to be a better alternative to Defora. But right now, what I can say is that I ship with something. It has an interface. You can start a browser, file manager, whatnot. I'm trying to integrate it better with the system. Since it's small and I know the software well, I can easily adapt it to NetBSD or EdgeBSD in this case. And on top of that, I've been working on embedded use, and it's the same software that I use on embedded and on desktop environments. I just changed the UI. And this way, it shares the same bugs. It's less work to support both aspects. And you know that if you have something working on your desktop, it will work also on your device, which is usually not the case if you look at Office software or PDF viewers or whatnot. There is always something different, a difference in functionality, and I'm always frustrated when I kind of do what I want to do on my phone, and I know that I can do it on my computer, and my phone is a computer, and I don't see why it should be more limited than my regular desktop if it doesn't involve resources. So that's basically the point here. So with this said, a lot of it is about responsibility. We are responsible for the software running on the computers of our users. And I think one essential part of this process is to actually deliver that software securely and to have it run in a constrained environment, which lets the software be functional, but without exposing the users, which should be a strength of BSD, which was already mentioned before this talk. So something essential, which I already touched earlier, is to provide secure packages or sets, and it involves signing them. It turns out NetBSD supports signing packages since 2001, which is really early. It was there for a very long time, but apparently nobody used it. It was never enabled by default, and I don't know if it's been rotting or because something has changed or what happened or didn't happen, but to be able to actually use it, I had to fix it. I managed to get the fixes back into package source and NetBSD, which is great. And even better now, Jay Perkin from Joyent continued this work and had it switch from using an external tool, GNU-PG, to a library which is already in base called NetPGP. So now we have a way to almost fully bootstrap, install signed packages without needing external tools which are not in base. So this is really awesome, and it finally paves the way for shipping signed packages by default. Signing packages is one thing, but it's also very important to transfer these packages securely. Signatures are not absolutely foolproof, and you don't know if your users are actually going to check the signatures. It can be turned off, of course. You may not check signatures if you don't want to. So we should really provide secure access to the source and to the binaries. And nowadays, we should be able to do that. We should be able to have HTTPS or SSH. But if you look at the FTP servers of NetBSD, well, they are still plain text. I think that's a shame. And I haven't looked recently, but I don't remember finding any HTTPS mirror. I don't remember seeing the option inside sysinst, inside the installer. And I really pull my hair when I see that. I don't understand. We are in 2015, and I think it should be a requirement, actually. So as you can see, EdgeBSD is also focusing on security and trying to actually improve the security of the system, which means, in the first place, enabling SSP in all of base and in package source. I've been also running into discussions doing this. Apparently, one argument was that SSP is useless, but then we have it in place already for these packages passing file formats or being exposed to the network. So if we do that, why is it useless? So then why not enabling it in all of base? Because it does catch bugs, actually. It doesn't catch all the bugs, but it catches a lot of them. And if you install, say, postfix from package source, it's exposed to the network, but it's built without SSP. We had no support for SSP up to this day in package source. Maybe I should clarify. SSP is stack smashing protection, formerly known as Propolis, and it enables protection against buffer overflows, which is quite trivial. You have a cookie on the stack, and if you return from a function, if the cookie changed, the compiler checks that and aborts. And in my view of things, I prefer to fail safe than being hacked. So I prefer, if my program's abort, I can check the core dumps and then fix all the things. So I had to push that into package source just a few months ago. Also something amazing in NetBSD, we had PAX support for a very long time. Almost, I think right after OpenBSD actually did it in the first place. It's never been enabled by default anywhere. So it was simply sitting there and no one was using it. So I enabled the flag, booted the kernels, realized that it actually works, except for a few binaries, unfortunately, like Firefox, OpenOffice, Quake 3, but we don't really care about that, and a few others, but very few, but the very critical ones, including Quake 3, actually. And I don't understand why we should have this basically for free security feature. Even in Zen, it works with Zen. I'm running it on my laptop. I have PAX with Zen on my laptop, and we just never enabled it so far. But then PAX is not enough on its own. You also need to have full randomization of the memory layout of your processes. You need position-independent executables, and we also support that. That's great, but it's also not enabled by default. In base, it's just a flag. I enabled it, it's fine, it works. This system is running NetBSD with PIE, with ASLR, with everything enabled, except OpenOffice, or LibreOffice. And it's just fine. And it's actually even possible to do that for package source. I have some patches, like pending integration. There are still issues with that. I cannot build the full 12,000 packages, but we can start from there. We can actually go and do it. OpenBSD has also further improvements, offering something called RelRow, which I don't fully master, but when I enable the flags and I read what it does, it seems to be sound and a very good thing to have. Basically, if I got it right, it says the relocation tables as read-only, And then the exploits can no longer go and modify the values there to execute their own code and bounce on other functions or gadgets. And it seems to work fine. And you can actually check and audit the system for having this enabled. You can just check the elf structure and see that the flag is set as read-only for these sections, and it's good. Also very important, something that Debian is doing right now actually, is working on reproducible builds, meaning that if you build the system from the same sources, it will build the same binaries. So you have to get rid of the timestamps. You have to get rid of many CVS IDs and so on, because they change depending on your system when you check out the source. But what it means is that when you give a binary to the user, you know which one it is, you know where it comes from, and when you check what went wrong with the software, you have the same. You don't have a moving target, you don't have users compiling binaries with different options, which you need to understand when you audit for the issue. When you check what went wrong, you have one thing to look at. And this is something that OpenBSD does now. They ship binary packages, and it's the only way that's supported for security issues, for reporting bugs. And for me, it's a key aspect. Unfortunately, it has consequences as far as how the system runs, because it may have consequences on the memory offsets at which your programs load, because by default, they may all have the same, which is making life easier for the bad guys out there. And therefore, we need full ASLR at the same time. So we need to get all of this together, or nothing, actually. We need to go that step, to make that step, and actually get out of the 20th century, because it's been 15 years, and I'm a bit ashamed when I look at the security level of NetBSD right now, I have to admit. But this is, of course, about contributing back and trying to help. So this is not a fork in the sense that we want to duplicate effort. No, we don't want to bring further division. We want to try. We want to show that many things actually work, that we can fix them when they don't fully work, and get them integrated once proven. So we are not changing even the system name in new name. We are still NetBSD. We are NetBSD developers or wannabe NetBSD developers. And this is one of the really biggest achievement that we have reached so far. I'm really proud of this. We have brought or helped bring new developers to NetBSD. We have Camille and Yuri, who were first with us, who we assisted them getting to understand the source tree, how everything works, where to find what. We even have a new architecture port in progress to the Lattice Micro Solid 2 architecture. Of course, we are integrating the patches. I'm trying to push everything that I have in my Git repositories upstream into NetBSD. And of course, my patches are still not perfect in many cases. I have to improve them, but at the same time, they can be reviewed. They are not just sitting on my private laptop, and I don't have to send patches to mailing lists to get them viewed. I can just push them to the Git repo, and people can just have a look for themselves, and even push their own improvements, which is right now not possible with CVS. And I think it's a huge deal. Just to illustrate what the LM32 architecture is about, I have a picture here of the Milky Mist. It's just a DIY custom video mixing platform, which can now run NetBSD thanks to the work of Fallen. And it's a really cool thing. You can check it out if you want. It features an FPGA and some other cool interfaces. So anyway, reaching towards the end of this presentation, unfortunately not everything is positive. EdgeBSD is also struggling, unfortunately. We have some issues right now, partly due to our limited manpower. Even reaching 10 members, it's still a relatively small project. And I lied a bit earlier during this presentation because we no longer have continuous builds right now because the infrastructure is down. We are hitting a kernel bug, which is 48739 with involving Vertio and QEMU version 0.12 or subsequent. And we are stuck. It's a bit difficult to fix this one. I'm asking for help. Please help fix this one. I hope it will make it to the final NetBSD 7 release. Even if this version of QEMU is actually authenticated, it's actually used by SmartOS, I think ELMOS, for the different zones, as far as I understood, and it's very relevant actually, even to this day. Would be great to have this fixed. So there are issues integrating all of our patches, but they just need to get better, more review, as I mentioned. But we are getting there, of course. And if you want to know where we are now, we are on IRC. We are on mailing list. We have a couple of mailing lists, one for users, one for developers. And so far, it's even so good that we don't have much traffic, unfortunately. We do everything on IRC, basically, which is not great, but that's how we roll. We are on the web, of course, at https, edgebsd.org. We are going to BSD conferences, and this is also great. I really love it. Appreciate all of the insights, the hallway discussions, and a special thanks today to Verisign for inviting me, or us, the project. Thank you all for the attention. I hope I helped you fight with the food coma. And if you have any question, just hit me. Thank you.
Any questions? Just come up to the mic, please. Thank you.
Oh, here? Yeah.
One question, can you tell me more about the reproducible builds work you did with the packages? What variables you're controlling for and how you did that?
So about reproducible builds, I didn't do any work on it in package source proper. The only thing that I had to do was to enable the flag in source because it's actually supported. It turns out it was not perfect, and I think we have some Debian developers using NetBSD as the kernel, which were using the NetBSD build system to get their binaries ready for testing them. And they found issues with that. So there's been quite a few fixes going inside the tree recently. And I don't know the exact status right now, but I think it's getting close to 100% for base, which is really awesome. And for packages, I don't think there is any work right now, and I didn't look at it. But it's something that we should definitely look at, yeah. Another question?
One more question about the reproducible builds. I was wondering about that. For the reproducible builds, is that the one where you build two different compilers, one with a trusted compiler, and have the compilers cross-compile different binaries to compare, or is that something else? Is that something different?
No, I think the idea with reproducible builds is that you have one source code, one compiler, and if you build it, it will always produce the same binary. So if you use a different compiler, it will produce a different binary. But given the same tool chain, you will have the same binary as a result. So with the same timestamps, or actually no timestamps, ideally, the same version numbers, the same memory offsets, if any, inside the object, and so on and so forth. So the point is to have something which is bit by bit similar to something anyone else would have built anywhere else in the world with the same tool chain. So with the same binaries and the same source code. Is there anything else I can answer?
So it seems like a lot of the work you did was, I don't know, it falls into the category of politics to me. And I know very few of us ever have to deal with that, right? So could you, if you could distill what you learned from what seems like a kind of painful exercise down into, say, two pieces of most critical advice, what would that advice be to somebody who's facing challenges in a project and wants to improve it and is debating whether they create another project or tough it out with this one? So maybe if you could cook that down to, say, the two most important things that somebody ought to take away from this in the political column, that'd be helpful. Okay, so I think I know what to answer. The first thing is you have to get the knowledge. So if you're in an argument and it's about either something technical or political or whatever, you need to have some authority. And it can mean you have to step back, look at it on your own, actually try to do it yourself to absolutely understand the way it works, or well enough
to be able to talk about it in the first place. And it takes, of course, a lot of time and dedication, but it also involves listening to each other and being nice to each other. And when you see that someone is talking to you about something you master and it didn't grasp something, you should explain it and not just say no. The second thing that I learned with this, which is also a rule in local hackerspace where I live in Berlin, the rule is who makes is right, who does is right. So if you do something, you're right, and it's a good thing that you did it. And there is no reason to say that it was something bad. You can say that in a given context, you cannot accept it, but it's still work, it was done, it was good, and so you should just go and do it. And if you don't, you cannot. You can speak forever about it. It will never be there, and you can never be sure that it will actually work or not. So I would say, get to know your shit and actually go out and do it. So yes, Sean, and I should have mentioned you inside the talk because we use your work also on SLR, and it's great that you're doing this on FreeBSD.
Well, thank you. It's kind of flattering to know that our work is going elsewhere. I just had a question about your packs no, packs not work or whatever.
Yeah.
Are you flagging ELF? Are you placing an ELF header, like a section header or P header that says mprotect doesn't work for this application?
So yes, in NetBSD it's an ELF node, this node section, and I have a patch for package source where I can flag offending binaries as not safe for packs. It hasn't been integrated yet. I have to improve it a bit, but I have good hopes of being able to push that.
Awesome. And
yeah.
How does that work with upgrades and custom applications that live outside of package source and outside of base?
You mean what users install themselves?
Yeah.
Or,
and proprietary applications where you don't even have the source to compile. Yeah. All right.
So it's a very good question, and it's very tough to answer. The hardcore open source security consultant inside me wants to say you shouldn't run proprietary software in the first place. Of course, it's not always possible. For the software that the user installs, him or herself, it's tough. You can provide wrappers for compilers, which will automatically enable Fortify/SSP. Possibly also ASLR with PIE and so on, but it can also be a bit too much magic under the hood and bring trouble where there wasn't any reason to bring any. I've been hitting this a lot in configure scripts, which was just calling GCC on a given source file, and it was producing a broken object because my GCC wrapper in package source was pushing some arguments by default, and it broke the most essential build. And this is definitely a problem. I don't have a silver bullet solution for that, but it's definitely a concern, yes.
Yeah, it's a tough problem to solve. One we solved not using ELF tagging, ELF notes, but using the Mac framework in FreeBSD, which is kind of an abuse of an existing API, but it works for our situation. Does the file system in NetBSD and EdgeBSD support extended attributes?
I think it does, and there is even an entry in the manual page for packs control that it should be implemented that way, but it's not done yet.
That is one of the features that we want to implement on our end, so maybe we should get together and collaborate on that.
Sure. Yes, one more question.
A quick and easy question. What are the hardware platforms that are currently supported?
Okay, so that's a very good one. Focusing right now on AMD64 and to a lesser extent i386. And right now there are the only two architecture where we provide binaries for lack of time setting up cross-compiling, essentially. I do have some ARM and SPARC64 machines at home, even on Alpha, and SGI MIPS. but the electricity bill was just too high to keep them running 24/7, which is the only way that I actually get to log in on them and use them. So we don't have much more than these two architectures right now in mind, unfortunately. Anything else? Then thank you again, and thanks for your attention. See you around. Have a great conference.